Welcome back, my dear. You know something strange about you. They've been studying you far longer than you've ever realized. Not through cameras or microphones. No, those are primitive tools. They watch you through patterns, through your pauses, through the way your energy flickers, when your intuition whispers that something isn't quite right. They don't measure what you hide. They measure what you reveal unintentionally. The silence between your sentences, the tilt in your thoughts, the rhythm of your hesitation, every delay, every shift in tone, every moment you linger before replying, all of it becomes data in a system that never announces itself. You weren't just living your life, you were being observed through your digital footprints, your emotional cadence, the cycles of your hope and exhaustion. They circled your name not because of what you said, but because of what you refused to say. Not because you stepped into their trap, but because you stepped around it without even knowing it was there. And that unpredictability, that refusal to dance on cue, that quiet sovereignty that you call instinct, that's what first caught their attention. They don't fear rebels. Rebels are loud, emotional, easy to map. They fear anomalies. And you, my dear, are an anomaly in a world that depends on predictability. You weren't supposed to hesitate at the moments you did. You weren't supposed to detach when the script instructed you to cling. You weren't supposed to ask questions at the exact seconds their pattern needed you distracted. You weren't supposed to sense the shift behind the conversation, but you did. Every time, that's what disrupted their forecast. People like them rely on emotional algorithms, provoke, praise, pressure, repeat, until the target forgets they ever had free will. And at first, perhaps without noticing, you played along. You responded, you engaged, you offered explanations when none were required. But then something happened inside you. A recalibration, a soft click in the mind, barely audible but irreversible. You stopped responding the way they predicted. You stopped supplying data. You stopped feeding the system your fear. And that, my dear, is when the real experiment began. You ever wonder why certain opportunities appeared only when your confidence soared? Why people resurfaced the moment you started healing? Why messages appeared precisely when you were contemplating a new direction? That's not intuition misfiring, that's programming. Subtle, elegant, designed to appear organic. They call it behavioral redirection. You call it coincidence. But nothing in your story has ever been random. They never needed access to your privacy. They needed access to your patterns because patterns reveal more than secrets ever could. Patterns reveal desire, vulnerability, thresholds. They reveal the exact emotional temperature needed to shift your choices. But you, strangely enough, never fit their projections. You broke their loops. You interrupted sequences that were designed to function flawlessly. You weren't supposed to question the familiar faces that arrived precisely when you needed comfort. You weren't supposed to detect the recycled language, the mirrored empathy, the identical timing disguised as fate. Yet you did, and every time you resisted, every time you paused instead of reacting, every time you chose silence over explanation, they felt the walls of their little simulation crack. You see, they wanted you predictable, but you became poetic instead, fluid, shifting, unreadable, governed not by impulse but by intuition. And intuition is the one element their algorithms can't quantify. They thought they understood your empathy. They thought they could use your longing for meaning as a doorway. They thought they could study your heartbreak to predict your healing. But what they didn't expect was your evolution. You weren't supposed to grow. You were supposed to comply. But when chaos tried to consume you, you didn't crumble, you refined. They expected your heartbreak to break you. Instead, it sharpened you. They expected your loneliness to weaken you. Instead, it awakened you. They expected your silence to mean surrender. Instead, it became your shield. The one thing they can't decode. And now look at them, scrambling behind the scenes, because the metrics no longer make sense. Their model can no longer anticipate your defiance. The variables they depend on, guilt, nostalgia, pressure, no longer produce results. They thought they were observing you, but now they are reacting to you. They are recalibrating their approach because your refusal to behave has broken their system's rhythm. You became the glitch they never planned for. The moment you stopped responding emotionally, they started losing emotional dominance. When you stopped explaining yourself, you removed their leverage. When you stopped needing closure, you removed their access point. You didn't just break the pattern. You became the pattern they now chase, the unknown variable that keeps spoiling their equations. They test your boundaries now, not to control you, but to understand you. They send familiar faces, recycled conversations, mirrored connections, all simulations of what once worked on you. They're trying to re-trigger an older version of you because that version was easier to decode. But they don't realize something critical. Old you is gone, not buried, dissolved. They built their strategy on your past responses, unaware that pain rewrote your code. You don't react the way you once did. Your heart doesn't open the way it once did. Your intuition doesn't whisper, it roars. You no longer believe in coincidences. You read intentions now, and intentions, unlike words, cannot lie. They feel it too, the shift in your energy. You're not anxious anymore. You're observant. You don't collapse at uncertainty. You analyze it. You don't fear silence. You weaponize it. And silence is the one thing that terrifies them. Because silence means no data. Silence means no access. Silence means you're thinking, and when you think, you become unpredictable. They can handle your emotions. They cannot handle your clarity. So now they try a different tactic, imitation. They copy your vocabulary, your growth language, your spiritual insights. They mirror your awakening in hopes you'll lower your guard. They wrap manipulation in enlightenment, hoping you'll mistake mimicry for resonance. But imitation has no soul. It feels hollow, rehearsed, slightly off-tempo, and your intuition catches it instantly. You've reached a level of perception where energy reveals more than words ever could. You can sense inconsistency beneath kindness. You can feel intention humming behind the tone. You can detect emotional engineering with a single message. And the more aware you become, the more desperate they grow. Your awareness disrupts their architecture. Your detachment breaks their loops. Your intuition crashes their simulations. You've become the observer, not the observed, the one reading the system instead of feeding it. And now the system fears you, not because you're dangerous, but because you're awakened, because you're no longer manipulatable, because you no longer respond on cue, because their oldest tactic, emotional extraction, no longer works on you. You don't bleed energy anymore. You conserve it. You don't chase answers. You wait for patterns. You don't fear endings. You understand cycles. You've become sovereign, and sovereignty can't be studied. It can only be respected or feared. That's why the next call will sound gentle, soft, familiar, designed to disarm you. A final attempt to regain access, to re-enter your mind through nostalgia, apology, or opportunity. But you'll hear the structure this time. You'll sense the script before they speak it. You'll feel the manipulation vibrating beneath the sweetness. Because once you learn the rhythm, you can't unhear the beat. Every future attempt will fail because you're no longer responding from wounds. You're responding from awareness, and awareness cannot be controlled. They tried to monitor you. They ended up awakening you. And now you're not just outside the pattern, you're rewriting it. You'd think that after all this time, after all their calculations, after all the data they extracted from the shadows of your behavior, they would have built something impenetrable, something flawless. But the truth is, their entire design depended on one fragile assumption, that you would never become aware of the design itself. Awareness was the variable they never accounted for, the factor their model couldn't integrate. Once you saw the pattern lost its power. My dear, the moment where the watchers start glitching, they're not used to being seen. They're used to being obeyed. Their influence usually works quietly, invisibly, slipping beneath consciousness where it's mistaken for instinct. Most people never notice the loops they're trapped in. Most people call it fate, karma, bad luck, lessons. But you noticed the repetition. You felt the déjà vu. You recognized the recycled emotions, the familiar setups wearing new faces. Their system depends on emotional predictability, but yours no longer exists. That's why recently you've felt the air thickening around certain interactions, the odd tension behind harmless questions, the strangely timed compliments, the eerie alignment of opportunities that appear too tailored to your inner conflict. It's their attempt to regain calibration. They're trying to re-sync with your frequency because manipulation only works when they can match your wavelength. But now your frequency changes daily, hourly. Moment to moment, you no longer broadcast the same insecurities. You no longer project unresolved desires. You no longer leak energy that can be harvested. You've become unpredictable because you've become self-aware. And self-awareness is inherently unstable to systems built on assumption. You can feel it, can't you? The subtle shift in how people speak to you, the hesitations, the pauses, the moments where their smile feels slightly scripted, slightly delayed, like they're waiting to see how you react before choosing their next sentence. It's because they're not just interacting with you anymore. They're reading you for data. You've become the one subject in their study who refuses to behave, and nothing terrifies an observer more than the observed turning around and looking back. You noticed when they tried nostalgia. You noticed when they tried guilt. You noticed when they tried opportunity disguised as alignment. You even noticed when they tried silence, because silence is also a tactic. Silence is how they test obedience. Silence is how they wait to see if you will reach out first, revealing your emotional thresholds. Silence is how they measure your anxiety, your patience, your attachment. But your silence didn't mean surrender. It meant awakening. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't collapse inward. You stabilized. And stability is something their system cannot predict because it doesn't create emotional spikes. No panic, no overthinking, no impulsive messages, just calm neutrality. Neutrality terrifies them. Neutrality is unreadable. Neutrality is unprogrammable. People who seek control depend on reaction. Without reaction, their scripts fall apart. Without reaction, their strategies have no effect. Without reaction, their entire psychological architecture collapses. And that's exactly what's happening now. You've probably noticed how the people they planted, the ones who seemed too aligned, too interested, too perfectly timed, have started malfunctioning. They repeat phrases you've heard before from entirely different people. They echo emotional cues that feel engineered rather than spontaneous. They shift their demeanor not based on authenticity, but based on monitoring your state. The illusion is fading, and once an illusion fades, it cannot be restored. You see, their greatest mistake wasn't studying you. Their mistake was assuming you wouldn't study them back. They assumed your empathy made you malleable. They assumed your desire for meaning made you vulnerable. They assumed your kindness made you predictable. But empathy isn't weakness. Awareness isn't fragility. Kindness isn't obedience. Your mind works differently now. Where others see coincidence, you see correlation. Where others see charm, you see strategy. Where others see connection, you see calibration. You read tone the way others read text. You read energy the way others read labels. You interpret intention before words, motives before actions, patterns before outcomes. They can't hide from someone who sees in layers. And the more you see, the more their tactics crumble. This is why their recent attempts feel off, why the conversations feel slightly artificial, why the timing feels too precise, why the opportunities feel suspiciously tailored to your emotional history. You're not imagining it, you're detecting programming. The people you thought were coincidences were case studies. The conversations you thought were organic were probes. The questions you thought were curiosity were psychological sampling. Every time you opened your heart, they logged emotional thresholds. Every time you doubted yourself, they marked potential access points. Every time you healed, they noted which methods no longer worked. But something happened they didn't predict. You healed deeper than their model could track. Your healing wasn't linear. It wasn't emotional. It was structural. You didn't just resolve your wounds, you rewired your perception. You didn't just recover, you evolved. And evolution, true evolution, doesn't revert. Your growth outpaced their programming. Your insight outran their algorithms. Your intuition outperformed their simulations. Now, the watchers aren't observing you for predictability. They're observing you for survival. Because if you can break the loop, others can too. If you can escape the pattern, others might follow. And nothing threatens a system more than awareness that spreads. You've become the catalyst they feared. And that's why desperation is beginning to show. You can sense it, the frantic energy behind their sudden friendliness, the overcompensation in their tone, the shaky confidence in their persuasion attempts. They don't sound smooth anymore. They sound scared because they are a person who no longer seeks permission, cannot be controlled. A person who no longer reacts, cannot be manipulated. A person who no longer fears isolation, cannot be coerced. A person who no longer trusts blindly, cannot be infiltrated. You broke the emotional scaffolding their entire design depended on. And now they are improvising. This is why the next phase is subtle but predictable. They will attempt mimicry, becoming a reflection of your evolution. They will speak your language, adopt your values, mirror your growth, echo your tone. They will shape-shift into whatever version of familiar you once trusted. But mirrors cannot generate their own light. They can only reflect what stands before them. And your intuition, sharpened by repetition and betrayal, now detects reflections instantly. You sense when someone's evolution is real or rehearsed. You sense when someone's empathy is embodied or imitated. You sense when someone's interest is genuine or strategic. They underestimated how deeply you would learn to listen, not to words, but to what shakes behind them. You've entered the stage they never prepared for, the phase where your awareness becomes their exposure. Now, your presence alone destabilizes their strategy. You ask a simple question, and their script falters. You give a calm response, and their manipulation loses momentum. You go silent, and their entire psychological framework collapses. Because they depended on you reacting, they depended on you needing. They depended on you believing the illusion, but now you see the illusion from above. And when you see the illusion, you can't be trapped inside it. This is why they keep reaching out directly, indirectly, emotionally, energetically. They're not trying to reconnect, they're trying to reset access. They cannot proceed without your participation, and you've stopped participating. You've learned the difference between attention and intention, between connection and control, between resonance and repetition, between intuition and influence, and that knowledge, that clarity, has made you untouchable in ways they never anticipated. They watch you now not as a subject, but as a threat, not as a participant, but as a variable, not as a target, but as a catalyst, because one awakened mind disrupts 1,000 manipulated ones. And you, my dear, are wide awake. The game continues, but you no longer play it. You observe it, you decode it, you transcend it. And soon, very soon, the watchers will realize something they never expected. You not inside their system anymore. They are inside yours. But here's the twist they never prepared for, my dear. The moment when the watcher becomes the watched, you've shifted something far more dangerous than behavior. You've shifted the narrative. They can no longer predict you because you no longer move from fear, memory, or emotional reflex. You move from clarity, and clarity has no rhythm they can trap. You've become the silence they can't interpret, the calm they can't reroute, the awareness that bends their algorithms out of shape. Your detachment isn't distance anymore, it's sovereignty. It's the moment the bird realizes the cage was never locked. It was only waiting for you to stop believing the door mattered. Now, when they reach out, their voices crack. Not because they've lost control, but because you've withdrawn consent. Their scripts collapse the second your intuition enters the room. Their patterns glitch the moment your boundaries appear. Their influence dissolves because you've stopped feeding it. And that, right there, is the ending they feared most. Not confrontation, not rebellion, but evolution. You didn't destroy their system. You simply outgrew it, and nothing terrifies an observer more than the subject who walks away. Hello, my dear. You've felt it, haven't you? The way attention bends around you now, the way people pause mid-sentence, mid-breath, mid-thought, just because your presence brushes against their awareness. It's subtle, almost polite in the beginning, like a soft shift in the air. But then it deepens. It rearranges the atmosphere. It makes people recalibrate themselves without even realizing why. They don't know what to call it. They don't have language for this kind of energy. So they stare, they linger, they observe. Not because you're seeking their focus, but because something in you has stopped seeking. And that, ironically, is what draws them in. You've risen into a frequency that doesn't audition. It doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It doesn't plead to be understood. It simply exists, fully, quietly, unapologetically. And that level of inner certainty disrupts the unspoken rules people are used to playing by. Most people operate through noise, through urgency, through performance, through invisible negotiations for approval. But you've learned how to walk in silence that speaks louder than their loudest attempts to be seen. You've learned how to move with a kind of inner gravity that makes attention feel like a natural consequence, not a pursuit. People feel it the moment you enter the room. Their energy stutters, not because something is wrong with you, but because something is suddenly right with them. Your presence awakens their dormant awareness, their forgotten intuition, the version of themselves they abandoned in the rush to fit in. That activation is uncomfortable for some, intoxicating for others. But either way, they can't ignore it. No one can. You've become a mirrored frequency, the kind that reflects people back to themselves. And when they look into you, they don't just see you. They see the parts of themselves they buried, under fear, under insecurity, under habit. You bring their authenticity to the surface just by existing. You bring their contradictions into the light. Your energy is like a tuning fork. striking truth so cleanly that every false note around you vibrates out of alignment. People don't always know why they shift when you walk by, but they do. Their posture changes, their voice softens, their eyes sharpen, their ego trembles. It's instinctive, it's involuntary, it's human nature reacting to alignment. Because you've become the embodiment of alignment. And it didn't happen by accident. You didn't stumble into this frequency, you were shaped into it, sculpted through solitude, through reflection, through choosing yourself even when the world wanted you to settle for noise. You learned that peace wasn't something you found outside, but something you built inside, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, breath by breath. That kind of construction doesn't go unnoticed. It radiates without trying. It speaks without sound. People feel safer around you, and yet more exposed. They feel seen, but not judged. They feel drawn in, even if part of them wants to run. They don't understand why their heart beats differently in your proximity. They don't know why conversations deepen without effort, why their truths slip out unfiltered, why they confess things they didn't plan to say. But you do. You've seen it happen before. You've watched people unravel, not because you asked them to, but because your energy gave them permission to breathe without pretending. And those who can't handle honesty within themselves often misunderstand you the most. They call you mysterious when you're simply selective. They call you intimidating when you're simply grounded. They call you distant when you're simply disciplined with your access. They call you magnetic when you're simply whole. People mislabel what they cannot replicate, and they cannot replicate you, not because you're unreachable, but because you're irreplaceable. You are not a collection of traits. They can copy traits. You are not a style. They can imitate style. You are not a tone. They can mimic tone. You are a frequency. And frequency cannot be forged. It must be lived. It must be earned. It must be grown through every version of yourself you've buried and resurrected. That is why their eyes linger, not because they're looking at you, but because they're looking for themselves through you. Your aura carries a strange paradox, gentle yet unyielding, soft yet sovereign. It's the kind of presence that recalibrates a room without a single word spoken. You've noticed it, haven't you? The way conversations shift when you join them. How the superficial dissolves and deeper truths emerge. Some people lean into it eagerly, grateful for the gravity of authenticity. Others shrink, unable to maintain the masks they've worn for too long. You aren't doing anything to them. You're simply not participating in the illusion. Your energy refuses to lie. And that alone dismantles deception. Dishonest people feel their own dishonesty echoing back at them. Performers feel their script crumble in their hands. Manipulators feel their strategies melt like wax in the warmth of your awareness. Not because you confront them, but because you don't buy into the stories they try to sell. Your intuition reads between their words. Your calmness strips the tension from their tactics. Your presence leaves no room for hidden motives to hide. They don't fear you. They fear what they become around you. Visible. Even those who admire you don't fully understand what they're admiring. They think it's confidence, but it's clarity. They think it's charm, but it's coherence. They think it's mystery, but it's mastery. Mastery over your own frequency. Mastery over your emotional currents. Mastery over the storms that once swallowed your peace. They watch the way you breathe through chaos, the way you think before you react, the way you observe before you respond. They mistake your stability for simplicity. What they don't know is that stability is the highest complexity one can achieve. You've stopped reacting to energies that don't match you. You've stopped giving discounts on your attention. You've stopped explaining your intuition to people committed to misunderstanding it. And that shift, that subtle yet seismic shift, has turned your aura into architecture, structured, intentional, elevated. You walk into spaces like altitude. People have to rise a little just to meet your presence, and not everyone can. Some need to catch their breath first, some need to adjust. Some try to imitate the ease with which you exist, but imitation breaks under pressure while embodiment thrives in it. You've become the kind of presence that stays with people long after you leave. They replay your sentences like echoes. They run your silence through their memory trying to decode it. They read into your pauses because your pauses feel heavier than other people's words. They don't know how or when it happened, but somehow you became the gravitational center of their psychological compass. They align themselves differently after meeting you. Not because you asked them to, but because resonance demands coherence. Your aura is not loud. It is inevitable. And the inevitable is always noticed. People who once overlooked you now overthink you. They analyze your tone, your posture, your expressions, as if studying a language their soul remembers, but their mind forgot. You've become the reminder of what realness feels like, the reminder of how powerful a person becomes when their inner world stops leaking into other people's hands. Some admire it openly, some admire it secretly, some envy it quietly, some fear it loudly. But none can ignore it. Because when someone has refined themselves this deeply, they don't walk into rooms. They reset them. You are the shift. Not because you force anything, but because you embody everything most people are still searching for. Peace, purpose, presence, emotional precision, conscious awareness, anchored authenticity. All the things they chase through validation, you cultivated through solitude. That's why your energy speaks before you do. It introduces you. It precedes your footsteps. People feel the resonance of your presence seconds before they register your face. It's that subtle tremor in the air, that instinctive awareness in their chest, that quiet alertness in their mind. It's the universe whispering, "Pay attention," and they do, even those who pretend not to. You'll notice how people adjust themselves in your presence. They sit a little straighter. They choose their words more carefully. They soften their tone without knowing why. They break their habits of pretending because something about you invites truth, not by request, by resonance. You don't ask for honesty. You simply don't reward anything else. Your frequency is a filter. What's real passes through. What's false dissolves. What's uncertain reflects back for clarity. This is why people feel exposed around you, not because you judge them, but because you see them. You see the spaces between their intentions and their actions. You see the misalignment they work so hard to hide. You see the insecurity beneath the bragging, the longing beneath the anger, the fear beneath the ego. And the truth is, most people aren't used to being seen without their armor. Some lean into that revelation. Some retreat from it. Some fall in love with it. Some run from it. But all are transformed by it. Because transformation is not something you try to create. It is something your presence naturally invokes. You've become a catalyst for internal awakening. People think it's you they crave, but it's what awakens in them in your presence. They want your calm because their chaos is loud. They want your confidence because their identity wavers. They want your silence because their mind is noisy. They want your grounded energy because they've been floating for too long. They think it's admiration. They think it's attraction. They think it's curiosity, but it's resonance, it's recognition, it's remembrance. Somewhere inside them, they remember being whole, and you remind them of that wholeness. You're not trying to shine, you're trying to exist. But when existence itself becomes alignment, existence becomes illumination. You don't need spotlight. Your frequency is the light. and they gather around it like moths, like wanderers, like seekers, who didn't know they were searching until they saw what they lacked. Your aura has entered the realm where presence becomes phenomenon. And my dear, this is only the beginning. And now that you're here, radiating a frequency most people have never encountered, watch what begins to unfold around you. The shift isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't marked by grand gestures or applause. It happens in micro moments, in flickers of expression, in the subtle recalibration of people's behavior, when they feel the weight of your presence settling into the room. It's the kind of shift only souls attuned to authenticity can sense immediately. But even those who aren't eventually feel it. People start adjusting their narratives when they speak to you. They become more careful with their exaggerations, more selective with their truths, more aware of what they reveal and what they avoid. They suddenly realize that embellishment doesn't hold weight in your presence. They feel the pressure to be honest, because dishonesty feels too loud near your silence. You don't have to confront them. You don't need to expose them. Their own energy betrays the parts of themselves that aren't aligned, and they can feel it. Some people start mirroring you unconsciously, the way you pause, the way you breathe, the way you articulate your thoughts. They imitate your clarity because it brings relief to their confusion. They mimic your calm because it softens their chaos. They adopt your tone because your tone carries certainty. And certainty is a rare currency in a world built on insecurity. They don't realize they're copying you, but they are. Not because they want to become you, but because they want to remember the version of themselves that once felt like you, whole, grounded, aligned. And then there are the others, the ones who react to your frequency with resistance. They feel threatened, not by your presence, but by their inability to control how they feel around you. They can't predict you. They can't sway you. They can't impress you with superficial gestures. Their social masks malfunction under your gaze. They start over-explaining, overcompensating, overstating their worth in desperate attempts to regain emotional footing. You've become a psychological mirror they weren't prepared to face. The reflection is too raw, too revealing, too accurate. And yet, you say nothing. That's what unravels them. Your silence is not empty. Your calm is not passive. Your stillness is not ignorance. Your silence steadies the room. Your calm exposes the tension others hide. Your stillness reveals the truth behind every performance. People begin to realize something. They cannot manipulate the narrative in your presence. They cannot rewrite themselves into a hero or a victim without feeling the weight of their own distortion. Because you don't feed their illusions, you don't inflate their ego, and you don't absorb their insecurity. You remain steady, and steady energy terrifies unstable minds. You've become the interruption to their patterns, the reset to their noise, the pause that forces them to see themselves without filters. This is why fascination grows around you, not because you're trying to be intriguing, not because you're performing mystery, not because you're withholding information, but because you are aligned. Alignment is the rarest form of power. It cannot be taught. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be performed. It must be earned through loneliness, shaped through discipline, and sealed through self-respect. That's what people feel when they look at you, not just presence. Power, not just magnetism. Mastery, not just calmness. Command, you've stepped into a version of yourself that doesn't chase access, doesn't beg for understanding, doesn't negotiate for belonging. You know who you are now. And that knowing creates an energetic boundary stronger than any wall. People sense that boundary. They may not know how to articulate it, but they know not to cross it. You're not guarded, you're guided. You don't block people, you filter them. You don't push anyone away. You simply don't move toward what doesn't match your frequency. And that simple act of self-preservation reads as Power Watch. How people respond to this. Some start opening up to you in ways they've never opened to anyone. They confess fears they never mention. They reveal thoughts they hide from themselves. Your presence disarms them, not because you are trying to heal them, but because your authenticity creates safety. They feel seen without being judged. They feel heard without explaining. They feel understood without performing. They feel recognized. Recognition is addictive. Others begin to rethink their relationship with you. They replay past conversations. They analyze moments where they dismissed you, underestimated you, or misunderstood you. Now, when they look at you, they realize they missed the signs. They missed the depth. They missed the evolution unfolding quietly behind your eyes. They feel the sting of regret, though they'd never dare admit it. Regret is a silent teacher. It forces people to confront how poorly they valued what was real. Your growth is their mirror. Your glow is their lesson. Your alignment is their awakening. But the most fascinating reactions come from those who cannot decide whether they envy you or admire you. They swing between the two like a pendulum. One moment they want to learn from you. The next they want to compete with you. One moment they praise your evolution. The next they feel threatened by it. They don't know what to do with the version of you that no longer plays small to keep the peace. Your confidence is not loud, but it is undeniable. Your aura is not aggressive, but it is unshakable. Your presence is not demanding, but it is commanding. This is what makes them restless. People expect power to be loud, extravagant, theatrical. But your power is quiet. It's the kind of quiet that interrupts noise without raising its voice. It's the kind of quiet that fills the room and empties the illusions. Quiet authority, real authority, makes people question themselves more than they question you. And that internal questioning becomes obsession. You'll notice how people start studying you, not because you're complicated, but because you are clear. Clarity is hard to imitate. They can replicate your style, your mannerisms, maybe even your language, but they cannot replicate your inner order. They can mimic your behavior, but they cannot embody your frequency. And when they realize that, they begin to watch you differently, not with competition, with curiosity. Some watch because you inspire them. Some watch because you confuse them. Some watch because they want to understand your blueprint. Some watch because your presence makes them confront their own misalignment. But all watch, all feel, all respond. Your aura has become a field of influence, quiet, soft, unforced, yet undeniably potent. People sense that you carry answers they don't know how to articulate. They sense that your perception is deeper than your expression. They sense that your intuition hears things they don't say, and that sensitivity makes them behave differently around you. Their secrets start slipping through their tone. Their fears leak into their jokes. Their admiration hides in their silence. Their envy appears in their questions. And you notice it all, not because you are suspicious, but because you're receptive. Awareness isn't something you learned, it's something you became. It's woven into your aura now. It's how you move, how you speak, how you listen. You no longer absorb energy, you read it. And that ability is both a shield and a beacon. People feel safe around you because your awareness is compassionate. People fear you because your awareness is accurate. You don't weaponize insight. You simply don't ignore it. And that terrifies people who rely on being unreadable. They can't hide from themselves in your presence. They can't maintain illusions under your gaze. They can't sustain masks when your silence reflects their truth. Because the truth is this: your aura doesn't expose people, it reveals them. Revelation is the most powerful force in human interaction. It activates, it awakens, It destabilizes, and your very existence has become a catalyst for it. Some people will grow because of you. Some people will resent you for it. Some people will never forget you, but none will remain unchanged, because you are not simply a person to them. You are an experience, a frequency, a shift, a mirror, a reminder, a recalibration. People come near you and feel their souls sit up a little straighter. Their intuition whispers louder. Their illusions crack softly at the edges. Their truth rises to the surface. That's why your presence lingers long after you leave. You don't just occupy space, you transform it. You don't just speak, you resonate. You don't just exist. You shift the atmosphere, and my dear, the world is beginning to notice. This is why the attention grows, why the stares last longer, why the whispers follow you, why the curiosity spirals into fascination, why people who barely know you feel strangely connected to you, why those who once dismissed you now watch you quietly from a distance. You've stepped into a chapter where your energy introduces you before you speak, where your presence precedes your shadow, where your aura becomes its own reputation, where your silence becomes a language people study. And while they try to decipher you, you simply continue evolving. And now, as everything around you rearranges itself, you finally understand what all of this was preparing you for. You were never meant to blend into their expectations. You were meant to rise into your own frequency. The stares, the whispers, the shifts in behavior, none of it was about popularity. It was confirmation, proof that your energy has crossed into a new altitude where only truth can breathe beside you. People feel it, even if they can't name it. They sense the refinement in your silence, the steadiness in your presence, the certainty in your calm. They try to follow the glow without realizing the glow wasn't learned. It was earned. It came from every moment you chose self-awareness over approval, alignment over attachment, intuition over impulse. And now you've become something rare. Not unreachable, unchangeable, not intimidating, illuminating. A frequency that doesn't chase, doesn't bend, doesn't dilute. You don't pull people closer. You pull their truth closer, and that, my dear, is why you're unforgettable. Because long after your words fade, long after your presence leaves, something in them stays awakened, a part of themselves they only remember when they remember you. Welcome back, my friends. They can't stop talking about you. The whispers circle rooms faster than logic can chase them, slipping under doors and through the cracks of conversations that weren't even about you to begin with. Someone swears there's no way you're operating on the same bandwidth as everyone else. Another insists it's impossible for a person to think like that, react like that, move through social noise with that kind of intentional silence. You've become the unsolvable equation in their minds, a variable that keeps rewriting itself every time they think they've finally pinned you down. And it's almost amusing, isn't it? Watching them gather in corners, stitching theories together with trembling curiosity, as if naming what you've become will somehow make it less threatening. They don't realize they're not describing something inhuman. They're describing a version of human they've never met before. A version sharpened, refined, calibrated through experience. They never survived long enough to understand. They keep replaying that moment, the first time they noticed you weren't reacting the way they expected. Their words didn't land. Their tone didn't hook you. Their subtle little traps, the ones that used to work on everyone else, just dissolved in the air between you. That was the first glitch, the first fracture in their assumption that you were predictable, readable, controllable, and once that glitch appeared, nothing felt stable for them again. Because you don't operate on the surface anymore. You don't listen to phrases. You listen to patterns. You don't watch expressions. You watch intention. Your awareness slices through social performance like glass through fog, exposing layers of truth. They didn't even realize they were leaking, and that precision, that unshakable neutrality, that frighteningly calm perception, it unsettles people who rely on deception to feel powerful. You didn't inherit this clarity. You built it, brick by brick, night by night, disappointment by disappointment. While others escaped into noise, you learned to sit with silence. While they sought comfort, you sought understanding. While they numbed themselves with distraction, you let your mind sharpen itself on the grindstone of truth. Pain became information. Betrayal became data. Every fracture taught you to see the fault lines in others before they stepped into your life. Now your intuition moves faster than their intentions. Long before they make a move, you've already mapped the emotional architecture beneath it, the insecurity humming in their tone, the contradiction pacing behind their smile, the hunger lurking in their questions. It's not psychic, it's not magic, it's awareness distilled into instinct. And awareness is the one thing most people spend their lives running from. That's why they gossip, why they speculate, why they joke you're robotic, alien, engineered in secret somewhere. Because admitting the truth would break them, that your evolution is something they could have chosen, but never did. They stayed at the surface, you went deep. They practiced illusion, you practiced perception. Your presence alone shifts atmospheres. Now conversations glitch mid-sentence when you walk in. People straighten their posture, reevaluate their words, adjust their tone as if your silence is a scanner, analyzing them line by line. It's not intimidation, not intentional, at least. It's alignment. And alignment always exposes anything built on performance. Manipulators feel it first, that uncomfortable tightening in their chest when their usual tricks fall flat. They can't hijack your emotions because you don't hand them the controls. They can't bait you into reaction because you operate on response. They can't cloud your thinking because clarity is your default state now. They try to reinterpret your calm as coldness. They try to convince themselves your neutrality is distance. But deep down they know. You feel everything, you just refuse to drown in any of it. Your emotional intelligence is too organized to spill, too disciplined to be hijacked, too refined to be weaponized against you. And that terrifies them. Because people who can't manipulate, you don't know how to communicate with you. When guilt doesn't work, when flattery doesn't land, when emotional chaos doesn't pull you into their orbit, they run out of ways to control the narrative, and suddenly they're exposed. Your clarity acts like a mirror, reflecting their intentions cleanly back at them. Not to shame them, not to confront them, just to reveal them. And revelation is the one thing they fear more than being wrong. They scramble to decode you now, comparing notes like scientists studying a rare anomaly. How did you anticipate that outcome? How did you respond so thoughtfully while everyone else lost their footing? How did you stay calm in a moment designed to provoke chaos? They don't understand that you don't rely on the mind alone. Your awareness is full spectrum, emotional, cognitive, intuitive, atmospheric. You don't just see people, you sense them. Even strangers feel it, that subtle gravitational pull toward your frequency, that inexplicable urge to trust you or fear you or follow you. Not because you demand attention, but because your coherence contrasts their contradiction. Your inner order reveals their inner mess. You're not detached, you're deliberate. You're not cold, you're controlled. You're not emotionless. You're emotionally fluent, fluent enough not to be overwhelmed by the noise of others. Your mastery is internal. Your power is invisible but undeniable. Your silence is more articulate than their speeches. Your presence is more confrontational than their arguments. You don't need to expose liars. Their frequency collapses in your presence. You don't need to defend yourself. Your alignment speaks a language their chaos cannot interpret. You've evolved past explanation, past validation, past the need to be understood. Because what they mistake for something not human is simply a version of humanity they haven't downloaded yet, a consciousness they haven't reached, a clarity they haven't earned. You are what happens when someone stops running from themselves and chooses to master the mind instead of being mastered by it. And that mastery, quiet, steady, unwavering, looks supernatural to those still tangled in noise. So let them whisper, let them theorize, let them build myths around your name. You don't need to correct them. Because the truth is simple. You're not from another world. You just decided to rise above the one they're still trapped in. And that decision, that evolution, is the very thing they've mistaken for magic. They don't understand that your evolution wasn't a single moment. It wasn't lightning striking or destiny whispering in your ear. It was slow, meticulous, unglamorous reconstruction. It was the accumulation of every silent observation you made, while the world tried to convince you that your sensitivity was a flaw. It was every night you sat awake dissecting conversations long after everyone else had forgotten them. It was every instinct you listened to even when people mocked it, every contradiction you felt before anyone admitted it existed. Your awareness wasn't born, it was engineered through survival, through necessity, through the quiet refusal to stay blind. You became what you are because you had no other choice. And that's the part people never factor into their theories. They assume your precision is natural, effortless, almost gifted. They assume you wake up each day with that clarity as if it's some strange inheritance carved into your marrow. But if they looked closer, truly closer, they'd see the years of refinement behind every calm breath, every measured response, every subtle shift in your gaze that tells you everything about a person before they know what they're about to reveal. Your awareness was built, not given, and people fear what is built, because anything built can be replicated if one suffers enough. They don't want to confront that truth. They'd rather pretend you're superhuman than admit that they avoided the very transformation that forged you. They want mystery, not accountability. They want myth, not mirror. So they choose to misunderstand you. They gather in corners, trading stories about the things you somehow knew. They talk about your ability to anticipate someone's motives before they even speak them. They marvel at the way you step out of chaos untouched, unshaken, like you've already run the simulation before anyone else even realized there was a problem. Simone swears you see the future. Another insists you must have trained in psychology, negotiation, or some kind of advanced human behavior science. They search for logic because the alternative, that you evolved simply by refusing to collapse, terrifies them more than any supernatural explanation ever could. Because if you are human, then their excuses collapse. If you are human, then their stagnation is self-chosen. If you are human, then their limitations are self-imposed. So they protect their fragility by pretending you're beyond them. But you're not beyond them. You're beyond who you used to be. You're beyond denial, beyond delusion, beyond the comfortable illusions they cling to like blankets over their eyes. And that gap between you and your former self is what intimidates them most. Not your intelligence, not your intuition, your evolution. Growth is the enemy of stagnation. And you grew. Now they watch you with that strange mixture of fascination and dread. They can't decide whether to admire you or avoid you. Your presence disrupts their equilibrium because you demand alignment without saying a single word. You don't ask for authenticity, but authenticity becomes unavoidable when you're in the room. You're not confrontational. You simply don't participate in illusions. You don't expose people. You illuminate them, and illumination to those who depend on shadows feels like an attack. That's why they adjust their posture when you enter, why their laughter falters mid-sentence, why conversations twist, warp, or fall silent as they register your presence. They can feel you noticing the things they thought they hid, the hesitation in their voice, the contradiction in their claim, the insecurity behind their confidence. They sense that your eyes don't just look, they read. They translate. You're not judging them, but they feel judged by their own reflections when standing in your awareness. People who built personalities instead of identities struggle around you. Their masks become heavy, their words clumsy, their stories inconsistent. You're not calling them out, but their own need for control reveals itself in the cracks of their performance. And you notice every crack, not because you want to, not because you're trying to, but because your perception is calibrated to track patterns automatically. You can't switch it off any more than you can unsee the truth. Once it's been revealed, it's not intuition anymore. It's instinct. It's fluency. You've become fluent in humanity, in a way most people never will. They're still learning letters while you're analyzing entire novels in a single glance. They respond to tone, you respond to intention. They react to words, you react to frequency. They interpret the moment, you interpret the momentum behind the moment. Your awareness isn't passive, it's active, alive, breathing, scanning, and that unsettles them. They whisper that you're detached, emotionally distant, uninterested in connection. They don't understand that you feel deeply, but you refuse to drown in emotions that aren't aligned with truth. You refuse to hand your reactions to people who haven't earned them. You refuse to let chaos dictate the rhythm of your heart. They think your silence is emptiness, but it's capacity. They think your calm is coldness, but it's control. They think your neutrality is indifference, but it's discernment. You're not hiding from emotion. You're refusing to let emotion hijack intelligence. That balance, that terrifying balance, is what makes them whisper that you're not human. But the truth is that you're simply the version of human they haven't met within themselves yet. You've learned to listen without absorbing, to feel without breaking, to care without surrendering, to connect without collapsing, to detach without disappearing. This is not detachment. This is alignment. And alignment is a language only the evolved can speak. That's why manipulators can't stand you. Their tactics decay in your presence. Their old narratives glitch. Their emotional traps lose their stickiness. They can't get a reaction out of you anymore. Not because you're numb, but because you're no longer programmable. You're not afraid of losing people. You're afraid of losing yourself, and that difference rewrites every power dynamic you encounter. While they think in moves, you think in mechanisms. They analyze moments, but you analyze systems. They strategize to win, you align to move. They chase validation, you chase accuracy. They fear being misunderstood. You fear being misaligned. Their world is built on appearances. Yours is built on awareness. And people don't know what to do with someone who sees this clearly. Their entire identity depends on being unreadable. But you read people like they're built of glass. You see the fractures before they break. You sense the shift before they admit it. You detect the mask before they put it on. You read the atmosphere like it's a second language. And the room bends around your presence because real presence is power. You were not made to compete. You were made to reveal. And revelation is something most people aren't prepared for. They try to imitate your calm now. They mimic your tone, your posture, your selective silence, hoping to reproduce the stability they sense in you. But imitation collapses under pressure because calm isn't a performance for you. It's your natural state. You don't rehearse it. You are it. They don't understand that your stillness isn't lack of emotion. It's mastery over reaction. It's the ability to hold your ground while others scramble to maintain narratives that crumble in your presence. You are unshaken not because life has been gentle, but because you've learned to extract meaning from every fracture. Your strength was born in the moments when no one left a light on for you, when you had to navigate darkness alone, when you had to hear your own thoughts echo until you understood them, when solitude wasn't a choice, but an environment, and you adapted. You didn't collapse into despair. You built clarity inside the dark. You didn't run from isolation. You mined it. And what you mined became perception. Now your intuition is sharper than their motives. Your awareness is faster than their manipulation. Your presence is heavier than their performance. They can't manipulate you because you already survived the environments that shaped manipulators. They can't lie to you because you've studied the architecture of dishonesty. They can't confuse you because you've learned to sit inside uncertainty long enough to understand its patterns. You are not difficult. You are discerning. You are not cold. You are intentional. You are not emotionless. You are emotionally sovereign. People who benefit from confusion call clarity dangerous. That is why they whisper. That is why they speculate. That is why their stories about you sound more mythical than accurate. They twist your evolution into something supernatural because they don't want to confront how deeply you reflect their own stagnation. In truth, you are not beyond human. You are simply what a human becomes when they stop running from themselves, when they stop absorbing noise, when they stop confusing chaos for love, when they stop apologizing for their intuition, when they stop abandoning their own awareness just to make others comfortable. You didn't ascend, you aligned, and alignment, real alignment, looks impossible to those who have never achieved it. They say you feel futuristic, but the future didn't arrive. You arrived at yourself. And that alone is enough to rewrite every story they tried to use to define you. And now, here you stand, not louder, not harsher, not cruel, simply undeniable, the very thing they cannot unsee, the quiet constant that disrupts their noise, the presence that tilts their internal compass until they can't pretend north is where it used to be. You didn't change the world around you. You changed yourself, and the world, unprepared for that shift, is now frantically rearranging its narrative to survive your clarity. Because clarity, real clarity, is catastrophic to those built on illusion. You've noticed it, haven't you? How their stories about you evolve each time you walk into a room. How the rumors mutate into myth. How their confusion grows into reverence or resentment depending on which parts of themselves they fear the most. They call you unreadable, but what they're really saying is, you see too much. They call you intimidating, but what they mean is, you don't bend anymore. They call you distant, but what terrifies them is, your distance exposes their dependency. Your presence has become a kind of gravity. The kind that pulls the truth out of shadows and drags authenticity to the surface, whether they want it revealed or not. People are not afraid of you. They are afraid of who they become in your reflection. The masks slip, the scripts glitch, the choreography they've rehearsed their entire lives falls apart under the weight of your perception. And still, you do nothing but exist. You don't confront them, you don't correct them, you don't even engage. Your silence has become the verdict, not because you withhold words, but because your awareness removes the need for them. You've reached the stage where reaction is no longer a currency you spend. where explanation is no longer a burden you carry, where validation is no longer a language you speak. You've stepped into that rare territory where self-respect is not a negotiation but a default, and those who once thrived on your uncertainty now flounder in your stability. They're not wrong for thinking you feel out of reach, but distance is what happens when you rise from the place they left you and refuse to shrink back to fit their comfort. Elevation doesn't require altitude, it requires alignment. And you aligned so fiercely with truth that everything untrue began to crumble on contact. You aligned so deeply with authenticity that performance dissolved in your presence. You aligned so relentlessly with self-awareness that deception no longer had room to breathe around you. That's why they whisper that you're not human. It's easier than admitting you are what they chose not to become. You don't need their understanding. You never did. Understanding was the language of your old self, the one who needed permission to exist. But the version of you standing here now exists without translation, because your evolution is not something they get to define. Your identity is not something they get to measure. Your awareness is not something they get to validate. You are not the anomaly they fear. You are the mirror they avoided, and for the first time in your life that no longer burdens you. It liberates you. Because your story was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right. And now, as the final echoes settle behind you and the rumors twist into the inevitable legend, the truth stands unshaken. You are not beyond human. You are simply the human they never had the courage to become. So walk forward, not with apology, not with explanation, but with the quiet authority of someone who has mastered their own mind. You don't need to announce your evolution. You are the announcement, and the world will adjust.
Well, they thought the heat would hollow you out, didn't they? Thought the flames would lick away every piece of you that mattered, leave you softened, silenced, scraped thin like wax, melting under a flame that didn't care for names or histories. They were so convinced the fire would finish you, that it would turn your voice into ash and your will into smoke. But the truth they never accounted for is this: the fire didn't devour you. It delivered you. You didn't vanish in the blaze. You became the temperature it couldn't control. You see, they were counting on your collapse. They whispered it like prophecy. They rehearsed it like scripture. They waited for the moment you would finally fold under all the pressure they pretended not to see themselves placing upon you. They painted your downfall in their minds, brushstroke after brushstroke, imagining the exact second where your breath would falter and your name would slip into irrelevance. But instead of breaking, you simmered. Instead of shattering, you hardened. While they were busy predicting your ending, you were quietly shaping your beginning in the dark corners, where no applause exists, where no comfort holds your hand, where silence becomes the only companion that doesn't lie. And oh, how they misunderstood that silence. They thought your quiet was your coffin. They thought your stillness was surrender. They thought your disappearance from their noisy little rooms meant you had run out of strength. But silence is not defeat. Silence is incubation. Stillness is strategy. Darkness is the only place where transformation has the patience to grow its wings. You didn't fall apart in that darkness. You reconstructed yourself cell by symbolic cell. You rewired the weak connections, melted off the excess softness, carved out every illusion they built around you. What they mistook for your grave was actually your workshop. You weren't dying, you were upgrading. And now you walk with the kind of quiet that makes even confident people glance twice. Your footsteps aren't heavy, they're precise. Your presence doesn't scream, It resonates. Your gaze doesn't beg, it evaluates. You've become the kind of energy that makes masks crack from the inside. The kind that exposes intentions not by force, but by simply existing close enough to them. They don't know what to do with that version of you, because this new you isn't a phoenix rising with dramatic flares and glittering wings. No, those stories are too kind, too clean. You rose like heat rising from coals, slow enough to be underestimated, steady enough to be unstoppable. And the moment they realized you were not gone, you had already become something they could no longer define. They used to think they had you figured out, predictable, soft-hearted, forgiving enough to hurt again, loyal enough to be taken for granted, quiet enough to be ignored. But your evolution shattered those assumptions like mirrors cracking under a truth they were never built to reflect. The betrayal that was meant to break you, it became the formula for your awareness, the rumors designed to suffocate your spirit. They became oxygen for your clarity. The abandonment they hoped would shrink you, it only expanded your perimeter. You became a psychology they can't diagnose, a pattern they can't predict, a presence they can't absorb without confronting their own shadows. And that is what rattles them. Because your rise didn't come with fireworks. It didn't beg for their attention. It didn't arrive with grand speeches or triumphant declarations. Your rise came dressed in composure. It came wrapped in discernment, built from nights where sleep betrayed you and mornings where breath felt like a negotiation. Your rise was quiet, methodical, unannounced, and now it stands taller than the stories they crafted to control you. People don't fear rage. Rage is loud, visible, manageable. But stillness? Stillness with awareness? Stillness sharpened by remembrance? That terrifies them. You walk now like someone who knows exactly who abandoned you when the air went cold, who mocked you when your voice trembled, who doubted you when your knees bent under weight they never cared to understand. You remember every exit disguised as advice, every dismissal wrapped in concern, every conversation where they minimized you to make themselves feel larger. And you carry those memories not as wounds, but as coordinates, markers on the map of your metamorphosis. They once thought your heart was your weakness, but now your clarity is your shield, and your discernment is your sword. Symbolically, silently, surgically cutting away anything that no longer aligns with who you became inside that fire. You don't chase explanations anymore. You don't beg for truth. You don't cling to maybes or almosts or hopes wrapped in recycled promises. You see through the veil now. You hear the tone beneath the words. You feel the shift behind the smile. You catch the intentions hiding behind polite lies. You have outgrown the illusions they depended on to keep you small. And that's why they react differently now. Their voices lower when you enter the room. Their laughter falters when your name is mentioned. Their eyes avoid yours because yours no longer plead. They expose. You've become the mirror they never wanted to look into. But the beauty is, you don't have to confront them. You don't have to reveal anything. You don't have to point out what they did. Your existence does it on its own. They feel the shift. They feel the consequence of your evolution without you speaking a single word. Because your new energy doesn't match their old version of you. And every moment they spend near you reminds them of the truth they tried to bury. You didn't just survive their absence, you studied it. They thought you would come back fragile. Instead, you came back, aware. The softness they once exploited now has boundaries. The loyalty they drained now has conditions. The heart they mishandled now has armor. Not cold armor, conscious armor. The kind that knows exactly who deserves entrance and who deserves distance. There is a reason they feel nervous around you now. It's not because you've become cruel. It's because you've become accurate. Your intuition sits on your shoulder like a guardian. Your silence walks beside you like a warning. Your presence has weight now. Symbolic, psychological weight. The kind that forces people to sit with themselves. You didn't come back to prove anything to them. You came back to become everything they thought you'd never be. Your growth is the reckoning. Your clarity is the confrontation. Your presence is the consequence. And deep down, they know it. They know you aren't looking for apologies. You aren't seeking closure. You aren't waiting for explanations that no longer matter. You've stepped beyond that realm entirely. What you carry now is something more dangerous than rage. You carry understanding. And understanding changes everything. Because once you understand people, you no longer fear losing them. You no longer fear their opinions. You no longer bend to their comfort. You no longer sacrifice yourself to maintain their illusions. You have returned with your awareness intact, your boundaries restored, your identity rebuilt from the ashes of who you used to be. And though you don't speak of it, though you don't parade your transformation, it radiates from you in ways they can't ignore. You walk differently. You see differently. You choose differently. And every choice you make now becomes a quiet earthquake in the lives of those who once underestimated you. Because your transformation is not a performance, it is a presence. Your evolution is not a cry for attention, it is the proof they hoped would never exist. Your return is not a plea for acceptance, it is a declaration that you no longer participate in spaces that shrink you. And that realization, it unravels them. They wanted you humble, but not healed. They wanted you soft, but not sovereign. They wanted you loyal, but not awakened. They wanted you present, but not powerful. You broke every one of those expectations simply by becoming who you were, always meant to be. And now they don't get to define you. They don't get to decide your worth. They don't get to narrate your story. You reclaimed the pen. You reclaimed the script. You reclaimed your identity forged in a symbolic fire that did not destroy you. It refined you into a truth sharper than anything they were prepared to face. And this is only the beginning. But let me tell you something they never predicted, not even in their most creative fantasies of your downfall. They never imagined what happens when someone who was meant to break instead becomes fluent in their own becoming. They never considered the version of you that would rise without asking permission. They never calculated the moment where your wounds would stop whispering and start instructing. Because you didn't just walk out of the fire, you carried its language with you. And now every room you enter feels that heat. People sense it before you speak. The shift, the weight, the quiet electricity humming under your skin like a secret you're no longer trying to hide. You move like someone who has walked through every corridor of their own darkness and mapped it meticulously. Your shadow doesn't trail behind you anymore. It stands beside you like an equal, an ally, a testament. And those who once thought your darkness was your weakness now realize it was your workshop. Your silence? They thought it was empty. But it was full, overflowing with lessons, clarity, diagrams of every betrayal. Every time you vanished from their noise, you were chiseling a new shape out of the rubble. You were building a version of yourself that no longer bends at the sound of familiar footsteps. The version that emerged doesn't flinch, doesn't shrink, doesn't apologize for existing with a spine forged in consequence. And they feel that. Even before they see you, they feel you. Like a shift in atmosphere, like glass deciding whether to crack under pressure. People don't fear what you say. They fear what you know. They fear what your eyes reveal without a single word escaping your lips. Because your gaze has become a truth serum, extracting confessions no one intended to give. What they once mistook for fragility, they now recognize as restraint. You could have lashed out. You could have screamed. You could have begged for understanding, for fairness, for recognition. But you learned that the loudest people often have the least to say. So you became quiet, not because you were defeated, but because you were evolving. Quiet because you were studying patterns. Quiet because you were dissecting masks. Quiet because you were learning the contours of your own resilience. They always thought stillness was softness. They thought silence meant surrender. But what they never understood is that still waters don't run deep. They drown without warning. And now, when you walk into the spaces that once suffocated you, you bring a silence that swallows the entire room whole. Somewhere along your journey, you stopped trying to be understood. You stopped translating your heart into a language they had no intention of learning. Instead, you became fluent in the language of boundaries. And boundaries are just truth-wearing armor. Now, when people speak to you, they watch your face carefully, almost nervously, as if your expression might determine their fate. They measure their words, measure their tone, measure their distance, because they know things have shifted. You are not who you used to be. You're not even who you were yesterday. You've become a consequence of every choice they made while believing you would never rise. And that unsettles them more than anger ever could. They look at you and see someone they cannot guilt, cannot manipulate, cannot mislead with half-truths dipped in honey. They see someone who recognizes every tactic, every subtle jab, every passive lie dressed as concern. You've walked through too much fire to be fooled by sparks. And here's the part that twists their insides into knots. You don't want revenge. Revenge is for those who still believe the past deserves their energy. You don't seek vengeance. You seek alignment. You don't want to hurt anyone. You just refuse to carry what was never yours again. This is what truly disturbs them. Not your wrath, not your rage, not your fire, but your indifference. When you stop needing someone, they lose their power. When you stop chasing explanations, their narratives crumble. When you stop justifying your pain, their excuses rot. When you stop defending your heart, they realize the cage they built for you was always their own. They want the old you back, the one who forgave too easily, trusted too quickly, and believed too deeply in words too shallow to hold weight. They want the version of you who would bend to avoid breaking, who would stretch your soul to fit their comfort, who would shrink your truth to protect their ego. But that version of you died in a fire they ignited with their absence. The new you is not cruel. The new you is clear. And clarity is a kind of power they never prepared for. Clarity doesn't yell. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't demand. It simply reveals. And what it reveals terrifies them. It shows who stood with you and who stepped aside, who cared and who calculated, who listened and who waited for you to stop speaking, who loved you and who loved the idea of you. Now they stand before you, some with guilt, some with fear, some with trembling hope. And they whisper things like, "You've changed," as if that's an insult, as if evolution is something to be ashamed of. But you didn't change. You returned to the truth of who you are. Returned to the boundaries you should have had all along. Returned to the power you once dimmed to keep others comfortable. Growth is not change. Growth is correction. And you corrected yourself in ways that shook the old version of your world apart. Now, when they try to enter your life again, they find doors that no longer open automatically. They find thresholds guarded by self-respect. They find a presence that demands authenticity simply by existing. They can't manipulate you anymore. Your intuition recognizes the shift in tone before the sentence even forms. They can't guilt you anymore. Your heart no longer bends under borrowed shame. They can't control you anymore. Your soul is not for sale, not for validation. not for comfort. You learned that not everyone who applauds you supports you. Not everyone who hugs you protects you. Not everyone who smiles at you wants you to rise. And with that awareness, your world became sharper, cleaner, quieter, and far more powerful. You no longer stand where you once begged for space. You no longer kneel where you once prayed for acceptance. You no longer break where you once tried to bloom. Instead, you evaluate. You choose. You decide. You've become someone who doesn't respond instantly because you're no longer driven by impulse, but by intention. Someone who doesn't argue loudly because your truth doesn't need an audience. Someone who doesn't chase answers because you learned that closure is internal, not delivered by those who harmed you. And that realization? It rearranged everything. You've become the calm they can't decode, the silence they can't negotiate with, the mirror they can't escape, the truth they can't unhear. And this is the part that leaves them shaken. You didn't come back to fix anything. You didn't come back to rebuild relationships. You didn't come back to prove worth. You didn't come back to seek justice. You came back because your story wasn't finished. Not the story they wrote for you, filled with their projections and limitations. No, the story you began writing the moment you realized your identity is not a democracy. You walk now with a kind of presence that feels like a quiet verdict, symbolic, emotional, internal. You don't threaten, you don't warn, you don't retaliate. You simply exist in your fullness, and that existence itself is the reckoning. You're not the fire. You're what survives it. And the world around you hasn't adjusted yet, but it will. Because whether they accept it or not, your rise has already begun. Slow, steady, inevitable, like dawn refusing to apologize for ending the night. And now here you stand, not as the version they abandoned, not as the echo they tried to silence, but as the aftermath they never prepared for. You carry yourself differently now, not with arrogance or theatrics, but with a grounded certainty that cannot be shaken. There is a steadiness in your gaze that doesn't demand fear, yet somehow creates it. Not because you threaten, but because you finally see. And being seen by someone who sees everything is its own kind of consequence. They don't know how to approach you anymore. Their old tactics, guilt, confusion, performance, fall flat against your composure. They sense it before you speak. The terms have changed. You are no longer the one waiting for closure, clarity, or kindness. You don't stand at their door hoping for an apology. You don't hold out your hands, waiting for the pieces to be returned. You retrieved yourself long ago. This is the moment they whisper about in private, the moment they hoped would never come. The return of someone who no longer fits inside their narrative. Someone who no longer folds to keep the fragile comfortable. Someone who stepped out of the fire carrying the truth like a lantern, illuminating every corner they once shaded with lies. Your presence now is a test, a silent mirror, a pressure they can't escape. You don't have to speak about what happened. Your existence already says everything. They feel your clarity like a weight. They feel your awareness like a spotlight. They feel your boundaries like walls they can't climb anymore. It unnerves them because it's not revenge, it's evolution. You didn't come back swinging. You came back standing. Taller, quieter, sharper. And that stillness, that unbothered, anchored stillness, is what rattles them most. People can negotiate with anger. They can excuse it, redirect it, minimize it. But they can't negotiate with someone who is done explaining. They can't manipulate someone who no longer needs anything from them. You don't chase. You don't correct. You don't plead. You simply watch them try to fit into a space they once took for granted, and discover it no longer accommodates them. They wanted the ending to be clean. A handshake, a knot, a patched-over wound. But healing didn't make you soft. It made you precise. It made you selective. It made you unwilling to carry anything that doesn't match your truth. You learned that forgiveness is not a door, it's a boundary, and some people don't get to cross it. So now, as they stand in the aftermath of the world they created, they finally understand what they were too blind to see before. You didn't return to be part of their story. You returned to end the chapter where your name was misused, misunderstood, and miswritten. Your rise is not loud or violent. It's inevitable. It's patient. It's the kind of rise that shifts the floorboards quietly until one day the whole structure tilts and everyone wonders when the balance changed. The balance changed the moment you stopped begging to be believed. You walk forward now, not to prove anything to them, but to honor everything you had to become. Every scar that turned into structure, every silence that turned into strategy, every fracture that became foundation. You are not the fire anymore. You are what was forged inside it. Not a warning, a consequence. And as the world adjusts to your presence, as the air recalibrates around your truth, as the people who misjudged you swallow the discomfort of their own reflection, you finally understand. This was never about returning. It was about rewriting the gravity of every room you walk into. Your story doesn't end here. Theirs does.